We are House Education on Wednesday, May 14th, 2025, continuing our discussion of H480, the Miscellaneous Education Bill. Our next set of testimony will be dealing with sections 10 and 11. Section 10 being the literacy portion of it. And we have two members of the Advisory Council on Literacy joining us. We're going to begin with the chair of the council, Gwen Carmoli, who is joining us on Zoom. Welcome. This bill is coming back to us with new language in it. This is new language. We're sort of confirming what we think we know about some of the new language here. And this seems the portion about the literacy programs or the literacy instruction seems like it's fairly innocuous, but we just need to sort of do our due diligence before moving forward. Anyway, Gwen, the floor is yours, and we welcome your testimony.
Thank you. Hi. And thank you for the invitation. I am Gwen Carmoli. I serve as chair of the Advisory Council on Literacy for the state. And we have been working on early grade literacy based on Act 28 of 2021 and Act 139 of 2024. The language that you have in front of you is actually a result of what happened from Act 139, which was an early literacy bill. When that got updated, Statute 2903 was updated, and there was a portion that was removed that related to grades 4 through 12. They had a clause that said for grades 4, and then they had a clause for grades 5 through 12. So there's been a request to revisit and add that language back in, and it came from some particular wording that said such schools. It was a small piece of language, but it really had implications about which grades is the literacy bill referring to, and which grades, how could we also address grades 4 through 12. So Act 139 was an early literacy bill. It was about grades K to 3, and it had requirements in those grades. The language you have in front of you is to put back into Statute 2903 something that language that supports our learners for grades 4 through 12. The council has made recommendations to support students in any grade, and made some specific recommendations to consider efforts for adolescent literacy, supports for achievement, supporting struggling learners beyond grade 3. And in our very first report, we said to expand supplemental reading instruction to learners in any grade. So this language you see in front of you reflects what the council's work has, and it reflects a review of evidence-based practices, research related to literacy instruction, aligns with the state's multi-tiered system of support, which is another requirement, Statute 2902. And it aligns with advocacy we've heard. So it blends a lot of things together. There are two things I would ask you to consider in this. Is there a way you can clarify that this is related to grades 4 through 12? There's one place where it says kindergarten. It's on line 14, section 10, page 14, the first line actually. I'm sorry, the third line. It says kindergarten. In addition, for students in kindergarten through grade 12, that I'm a little nervous that people are going to confuse the K to 3 requirements about universal screening, parental notification. There's been confusion as that was rolling out. Is that a K to 3 bill? Is that a K to 12 bill? I think we might hit the same question. So I thought is to say in that one, in addition, for students in grades 4 through 12, that's a recommendation I might make. The other recommendation I would ask you to think about, is there a way to have this implementation of section 10 start in July of 2026? I do not believe that the agency is ready to fully support this. I believe they support it in premise, but I don't think they have the guidance documents for this. And I don't think school systems, middle schools and high schools are fully prepared for this. So that's some consideration.
What you're talking about is not referenced in anything that we have in front of us,
No,
right?
it's not. I
Okay.
was wondering, I think you have a section, and it says effect dates at the very end
Oh,
of
yeah.
the poll.
Yep.
So it could say effect date, section 10 could go into effect, or you could add, I don't write the language, but perhaps you could add a line that the implementation of section 10 would be July 2026. I know my colleague from the council is going to be speaking to students from a right now point of view. And I certainly invite any consideration of student learning. And I'm also inviting the systemic part of this, that as we're implementing something, we need the resources in order to implement something well and avoid confusion. So
Yeah.
I honor and recognize the hard work and the advocacy that's going into this. The council supports the language in front of this and the intention, and would ask, could there be some clarification in particular for the grades? Grade 4 through 12.
We will do what we can. We're somewhat hamstrung by rules where we can't really bring in anything new
Okay.
without it delaying a lot of things. I mean, here's what I will say is that the Senate Education Committee still has, as of today anyway, possession of this bill. So any sort of changes to this section really needs to take place there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. And this also puts on the council and on the agency and on school systems communication. We can work hard and diligently on clarifying what is the K-3 responsibility,
Yeah.
or the 4 through 12 responsibility. So we've worked hard. We've worked collaboratively with literacy advocates. We haven't always agreed on everything, but we've worked on common language, and we always agree on meeting student need and providing supplemental instruction as soon as it's needed.
I just want to clarify your concern with sort of the language here where you think an extra dose of clarification would be good, is that to make clear what you don't want is this to be interpreted that students in K-3 only receive supplemental instruction.
Correct.
And
Or
that the core of sort of Act 139 remains clear and in effect.
correct. We want Act 139 to remain in effect. And for grades 4 through 12, some of the provisions in Act 139 would not be appropriate for grades 4 through 12.
Right.
Screening on phonemic awareness at a middle or high school level would not be appropriate for that student's needs.
One question that came up this morning in this is to, in that same section, why it says school shall provide support and information to parents and legal guardians, period, whereas previously it said of students regarding the student's current level of reading proficiency, which shall be based on valid and reliable assessments. You have any thoughts on as to why that was removed?
Yeah, some of that was in relation to high school in particular. As students move through high school, some students are on pathways where they may not be in a school setting. They may be doing an internship, they may be in CTE, and they may not be using a screener that has that valid or reliable information. But they are all working toward graduation proficiencies that are rooted in state standards. And so it was really an effort to meet needs of student pathways. That's another one of our state requirements.
Right, and I would assume that what you're saying is that not every concern about students' literacy is necessarily based on a valid and reliable assessment. Sometimes it's just based on observation, and you don't want to be hamstrung as to when you can contact a parent or guardian.
Correct. And we don't want to say that only one time a year an assessment. I mean, you could use the VITCAP, but VITCAP is taken in grade 9. It's not taken in grades 10 or 11 in literacy. Sometimes screenings are only done at the beginning of the year. There may be something later on in the year that you need to work and provide a layer of support and supplemental instruction. So really it was to create some flexibility, but to get to students' needs quickly.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That's helpful. Appreciate that. Cynthia, you're up. Yep, have a seat right at the front there. Welcome, and if you just introduce yourself and then we'd love to hear what you have to say.
And I'll send some papers down each side of the table. There should be one for everybody. And I should keep one or I won't. Let's go down the table. I want to start by thanking you folks here in the House Education Committee for taking up this topic. S-139 is basically a good law. There's this one little tweak, as Gwen mentioned, with a small word that changed the meaning of it and made it unclear whether it was for older kids or for younger kids, or for everybody. So my bibliography is in the background. It's on the back of this page, but I'll just tell you that I want to thank Gwen Carmelli too for her testimony and her hard work on this issue. I am one of the community members of the Advisory Council on Literacy. I speak for children and their families. I have had a lifelong interest in improving literacy in Vermont. I trained as a teacher at the University of Vermont and hold a master's degree in reading from Harvard. The parents of three gainfully employed students, the parent of three gainfully employed adults who have significant dyslexia. I presently work part-time as a literacy tutor with schools and with private students in central Vermont. Most of my students struggle with their literacy skills. Typically, their behavior improves dramatically as their frustration in trying to read is addressed by directly being taught how to read. It's very frustrating to be in school and not be able to do what people are asking you. So, as I mentioned, I'm a concerned citizen and community member. So my perspective that I bring to the council is a little bit different from many of the council members. I agree with the previous collaborative language written to restore the intent of 2903. I am asking that you support the wording of Section 10, H480, draft number 13.2, to ensure that supplemental literacy instruction for students significantly below grade level in grades 4 through 12 is offered in all schools and not just in schools with grades K through 3. I also note that currently the date for implementing this correction is July 1st, 2025. That would be this summer as soon as the bill passes. And it's different from what Gwen is suggesting. Please, for the sake of older struggling readers, keep that date. The Agency of Ed is implementing Read Vermont and has already offered training and support for all Vermont teachers. As Emily Lesh stated in her written testimony on April 18th, 2025 to the Senate Education Committee, in March, over 75 educators participated in live professional learning workshop focused on adolescent literacy, and nearly 200 educators and administrators registered and received the recording for viewing after the live workshops. So I think the Agency of Education has made good steps toward offering this information to teachers. They also offer support to any teacher who's concerned about something they're trying to teach. You can reach out to the Agency of Ed and they will offer you support. Because of that, I'd like the implementation not to be delayed. So Act 139's wording creates an inequity for older students, depending on the school that they are attending. Delaying implementation will continue this inequity for older struggling readers. All struggling readers in grades 4 through 12 deserve and need support immediately. They are already struggling to access their schoolwork. Reinstating a previously existing law, Statute 2903, should not need a time delay. Let's help these children immediately. Thank you for restoring support to all struggling readers. So the way the law was written when it was interpreted by the Agency of Education is if you go to a school like Cabot School, all the students, all the older struggling readers receive support. If you attend a school like the U32 district schools, if you're in Calais or Berlin or one of those schools, because it's not a K through 12 school, older students by this law, by the change that was made in Act 139, no longer necessarily receive that support. And this is based on 2903. They changed 2903. 2903 said Vermont wants to support all struggling readers. And that was passed 16 years ago. So for this year, those older students did not necessarily have that protection under law. I'm asking that you restore that and that you not delay it for another year, because I think the Agency of Ed is ready. And I think students deserve it. Do you have any questions for me?
The question probably maybe more for Gwen on this though, but certainly in principle, all students, I'm less worried about the agency's ability to do guidance versus the school's ability to provide those services. We're talking about real people, real hours, real dollars. And what exists in high schools, I think probably runs a gamut in terms of literacy support. So I guess I'd be curious, what are public schools tending to have about, budget challenges, a foundation formula that I'm pretty sure doesn't account for reading specialists for middle and high school, like the reality here. I totally agree with the principal. I'm just not sure it matches our fiscal reality.
Yeah, I think that's one of our biggest challenges right now.
Yeah.
And school systems have had to cut back quite a bit in the last 2 years. So some of the layers of support that they had are not as robust as they may have been during some of the ESSER years or in the past 5 years. I think we've lost some of our services. That's a challenge. Jay Nichols from the Vermont Principals Association, he had said schools need a little bit of time with this. He had suggested the delay. The agency had suggested the delay. Theirs was more on the how do we make sure that we provide the guidance on things like what is significantly below? How could you find that? What are some varied ways you could find that? And they need the person power and the focus time at the agency on this. And then schools need to do planning, which is more than just the theoretical, I'm going to put a support in place. You do need dollars and people to do that work. And so that's the systems part of it that's hard. I completely agree with Cynthia. I want students to have this yesterday. And we already have a requirement in MTSS to provide layers of supports. We just may not have the personnel to provide that supplemental extra literacy instruction. And so that's what the delay gives you. A little more time to build the guidance around that and build the budgeting around that or the human power around this. But Cynthia and I, we come from the same, the same heart on this entirely. We want to meet students' needs. Some school systems have this. They have a reading specialist in place, and some do not. And you may have a special educator who's doing some literacy pieces. You may have some staff who are spread across schools. We know we have supervisory unions and districts that share staffing. They may have had to take a coach and moves into another role right now, instructional coach. So we've got a lot of things happening that have been based on some budgetary challenges. We also do have students, as I mentioned, Jay Nichols had brought up as well. Sorry, Jay. He brought up that we have students in technical centers or in other programs, and they may be in those grades, but they may not have some of these supports in place in those programs. It's important that we think through how do we provide this layer of support, this supplemental instruction, and as Cynthia said, as quickly as possible, of course. So maybe there's a middle ground. I'm not sure, but the systems part will help with this holding long term.
So for committee members and for our two witnesses, I would just again say we're in a little bit of a political process situation here, more so than a debate over policy, and that is any changes we make to the bill once it comes over here would then either have to be settled in a conference committee or we would be amending it and sending it back to them, which we're running out of time. We certainly would like to make sure that whole such situation gets cleared up.
Yeah.
And of course, deadlines, it's not like there's a literacy police force that's going to be out there making sure everybody's compliant, but certainly would like to see.
Yeah, and the council is going to work as hard as possible on supporting communication and working with the agency to try to get.
But as Representative Brady pointed out, you can't create literacy specialists out of thin air in order to meet obligations. Yeah. Great. Any other questions, committee? Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that this has already been discussed in Senate Ed. They had testimony very similar to what Gwen and I are sharing with you right now. And their feeling was that we have an obligation, in my opinion, their opinion seemed to be, we have an obligation to help students in Vermont learn to read. It was pointed out by Doreen Dorfman, who was also, there were 4 of us who worked together to collaborate on the language. And Dr. Doreen Dorfman, who's a literacy specialist, pointed out that in this year, if we lapse this, students will graduate and they will not have the services that they should have. Every child graduating from a school in Vermont, I don't care what program you're attending, deserves to have as good a reading level and skill as possible. I know that that's the ideal, but that's what I'm looking for. And I'm looking for that as a parent who's worked with children who are struggling, as a tutor who works with children who are struggling, and with families who've been reaching out to their schools, trying to get help, sometimes for years, for their children. So that's the.
Sadly, deadlines do not always correspond to resources.
Right, I am aware of that.
Yeah.
Because this had been in effect for 16 years, and we wouldn't be here if this had been perfect 16 years ago, or even last year.
Great. Thank you both very much for your time.
Yes.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your consideration. I appreciate this. Bye, Cynthia.
We both
Council.
appreciate.
Bye, committee.
We both appreciate this very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on now to section 11 of the draft bill. We are very fortunate to have Tom Little here in person to discuss with us the National Guard benefit portion of this. We may need a little bit of background on the program.
Certainly. Good afternoon. This is Tom Little here for Vermont Student Assistance Corporation, VSAC. And would like to speak with you about section 11 of what has become draft 13.2
Correct.
of H480. Vermont National Guard tuition benefit program was started quite some time ago. It was really the first of what has become a significant number of similarly structured forgivable loan programs. And the model is if you give a student, usually in these scenarios, it's an adult, tuition benefits conditioned upon doing something in the future, typically working in a certain profession, some kind of an employment or service commitment, and they complete that obligation, then they don't have to pay it back. But it's structured as a interest-free loan so that if they don't do that, then it goes into repayment and they have to repay the funds, and those repayments go into the pool for funds that can be used again in the future. There are not a lot of these that go into repayment, and in recent years, particularly with the COVID federal funding, we've seen them in nursing, mental health workers, dental hygienists, teachers. I'm missing one, but it's a very interesting and pretty successful model. So why do we need to talk about section 2857 of the VSAC statutes? That is the section that creates the program. And I think it was 3 years ago, the General Assembly enacted a change to allow a eligible Guard member to pursue a second bachelor's degree or a master's degree. That was subject to a sunset that is coming up this July 1. So the Guard has presented its proposal to lift that sunset, not put another sunset on it. I have been in regular communication with Deputy Adjutant General Hank Arter, who I think is scheduled to speak with you tomorrow. I think what he will tell you is that the two basic things, the master's degree, they had 7 Guard members pursue that 22-23 academic year, and in the next academic year it went to 18. They find the program to be key to their recruitment and retention efforts. The Guard member feedback is positive. And he will tell you that they don't expect that this will detract from or impair access to the first bachelor's degree or Guard members who want to get their first bachelor's degree. So that proposal in section 11 is to strike the or repeal that subsection in the statute. You've probably, if you've been here for a little while, found yourself experiencing the following, that you've been working on a bill for quite a while. Then you sit down and read it again and you find something that you never had seen before. You say, gee, how come I didn't notice that? And I was reading this statute in a couple of months ago, getting ready for Senate education testimony. Said, gee, there's two subsections in the statute that have nothing to do with what the Guard sunset issue that are in conflict with each other. And VSAC is requesting to resolve that conflict. The area of the conflict is that in one place in the statute, it provides that if a academic program or major is not available in Vermont, that the Guard member can pursue it out of state. Later on in the section, there's language that doesn't say that. So we are proposing that we make those consistent. In my testimony in April to the Senate Education, I gave them language. Legislative Council modified that language. The VSAC and the Guard are endorse that language and support it. Senate Education overall last week took a straw vote on the whole bill, except for what they hadn't heard yet about cell phones and anything else that may have be coming on to it. And it was I think 401. I think one of the senators was absent. So that I think they're pretty solidly behind this language, these two changes. The Guard is, and Adjutant General Harder will, I think, reiterate that again tomorrow. And this is something that is funded through the general fund appropriations to the Guard. That money gets transferred to VSAC for distribution to the schools that the members are attending. I'm not familiar with the Guard appropriation. I believe it's intact. Deputy Adjutant General Carter can say more about that, but it's not, strictly speaking, while it's in the VSAC statute, the appropriation goes to the Guard.
Okay, so that money is embedded in the Guard's overall appropriation.
It is.
And then they basically have you
I
administer.
think there's language, as they say, in the back of the bill, in the appropriations bill, that talks about that flow, that cash flow. So that's my testimony. Be happy to say more or to respond to questions. And
Who administers sort of, I didn't have this question until you sort of brought it up, but if there is more demand than there is appropriation, how does it get resolved as to, well, I'm going for my second bachelor's or I'm going for my master's versus this other Guard member who's going for their first bachelor's?
question. The program is done on a rolling basis, like the other VSAC grant programs. So we don't wait until, let's say, a certain date every year and say, everyone who's applied up to date, we're going to look at all of those and award them on some rational basis. It's as they come in, if someone is eligible for the program, they get funded. And I think Deputy Adjutant General Harder will tell you that they have not exhausted those funds in the program on an annualized basis. We and the Guard issue a report to you, this committee and a couple of other committees every year that gives you the statistics about the volume of usage and what kind of programs and degrees it goes into. We do that in January every year, and that was filed with the committee. We did that in early February, I think. And if the committee has some interest in learning more about that, we can testify to that. But that doesn't seem to be a.
Would you, at some point, don't worry, pick up that report, just email it out to everybody in the committee?
It doesn't seem to have been a problem has emerged. But we do look at it annually, and if it turns out to be different, we will put it in the report and come in and testify about it.
I think that as I recollect the testimony a couple of years ago when we expanded it to a second bachelor's or a master's, was that it was not expected to cause any difficulty in funding anybody who wanted it. Same.
So good luck with it. Appreciate your consideration and support. Hope you can get home soon. I was telling someone that I was in the House in the 90s, early 2000s, and in the 94 session, there was a big fight over school funding. Imagine that.
Imagine that.
The Senate was Republican controlled and the House Democrat controlled, and the House had passed a very sort of visionary, or depending on the point of view, aggressive income tax themed bill that was not embraced by the Senate. And we worked into June, and what Speaker Ralph Wright set up was, so there were only two committees that were working, conference committees. So other members could come over and you could sign in and you'd get paid for that day. If you didn't come and sign in, you didn't get paid. So people would come over sometimes and sign in and stay for a little while and then go on their business. But when we
Any advice you have?
when we adjourned at that one last night, it was daylight had appeared last night. I think that
What act emerged from that particular?
it didn't.
It did ultimately.
It did not together. And it wasn't really until 97 when the Brigham decision was decided that pushed towards what became Act 60. And we're still talking about it.
Yes. But you go way back, people, in the 60s, there was a big push. You can dig up reports when every decade there seems to have been a big report and a big push to do something.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.